because trauma, mental health, recovery, it's all connected,
It's
right?
literally all connected.
It's all
What's up, y'all? Mr. Unbreakable here with main man Rob and Derrick, Rises Lions.
Yes, sir. The original recovery rebel right here.
Yeah. So we're back here again. Wanted to start off with everyone's journey, their breaking point or whatever happened with their testimony, where everything changed from going from addiction to a sober life and where they turned it all over. And here's Rob Decker.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with the inception of where I think things really shifted for me, and that's gonna be when I was about 6 years old. I came home from school and I found out my dad wasn't my real dad, and I think that moment was kind of the ultimate rejection for me, which I believe that addiction starts way before the substance, right?
Absolutely.
And so not only not finding out that my dad wasn't my real dad, but where's my real dad, right? So you kind of get this double dose of, and the reality is that, talking to my mother and the stories that we share, a year prior to that, my mom said my very first day of school in kindergarten, she got a phone call, and I was walking home and I had jumped on the trunk of a car to the roof, onto the hood, nonchalantly, like it was no big deal. And so, obviously there was trouble in the house for me to be acting out like that, to have no regard for the neighbors' vehicles. So apparently I'd been acting out for a while, but what I do remember is, finding out my dad wasn't my real dad, and then starting to notice over time, like how my sister, who was his real daughter, was treated much different than myself. And then just being exposed to the drugs, the alcohol, the violence, the lack of respect for authority, cops coming to my house because my parents are fighting and wilding out, and just watching my dad go toe to toe with cops, man. So I struggled with my dad, who was an authoritative figure, and then he struggles with authority, right? And I kind of adopted all that stuff, and then by the time I was, I think, 8 or 9 years old, I'd been molested by a neighbor kid, and my dad and his dad were friends, and so it was nothing that I could ever take to my dad. My dad was kind of like that hard-nosed Marine, like, suck it up, buttercup, like, be a man, kind of guy. And so, there was no way I could take the embarrassment and shame of what had happened to me to my dad. By the time I was in high school, I started drinking, and I just know within my first experience of drinking, what happened was I realized that I didn't have to worry about anything. Being intoxicated just kind of took away all the challenges of
To escape.
at home.
Suppress all that.
But within that same experience, I was also dating a young lady, and her dad's best friend was at the house watching her, and he had bought us alcohol. And that night he took advantage of her in front of me. So again, another experience that kind of, got me taking a pretty wicked path. And then shortly after that was the weed and acid, shrooms, and eventually cocaine. And I just started taking that path of drug and alcohol abuse, and not being able to maintain a healthy relationship. And I'm doing totally like the Cliff Notes version, so you guys can jump in at any time. But eventually it led me to my suicide attempt. It led to me dating a young woman, and her falsely accusing me of rape and attempted murder. And I decided to try to take my own life by jumping out of a 3-story loft window, where I clipped my foot on the awning, changed my fall, and instead of killing myself, I severed my spine, broke both my arms, and collapsed my lung, and got hauled off to the hospital to have a 10-hour surgery, only for the cops to come in to arrest me for rape and attempted murder. And so, that was probably, and that was by my 29th birthday. That was 8 days after my 29th birthday. But that was pretty much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing all that. I mean, I share some similar things. You know, somebody that I looked up to very much so. I idolized, in fact, less than me when I was a kid. And this is the first time I've ever said this, besides a couple people recently. So I know the traumas that has, that carries on from that, man. Still residual effects of, you know, self-worth, you know, why me, you know, I deserve this and stuff like that. And still fighting for your place in every conversation, every relationship. So, I mean, yeah, man, thank you for sharing that, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Gosh.
Well, it was a pretty, you know, tough road back to sobriety too, because even after my suicide attempt, the next 4 years, I was still, you know, medicating myself.
What was your breaking point to get sober?
My breaking point to get sober. Well, you know, it was an interesting transition because of the way God works in your life, right? You know, after my failed suicide attempt and the false accusations and all that kind of stuff, like, I realized that there was purpose in my life. But you have to keep in mind that, like, I started drinking and using around 14 years old, and here I am 29 years old when I jumped. So that's 15, that's half of my life that I was self-medicating. But the prior to that, you know, you're 0 to 14, right? So yeah. How much of that is you just being programmed, learning behaviors, you know, trying to figure out your identity, who you are, your self-worth, like, you're like a little kid, man, you know, and then you're spending all these years medicating, you know, because I can't even really remember my 20s. And, you know, as I'm healing from my broken back, you know, I'm going back to the gym, I'm working out, I'm getting off all the pain medications, but the one thing I just can't shake is the alcohol and the cocaine. I just...
They go hand in hand, too.
Yeah. Well, you know, what happens is, like, there was still a lot of my unresolved trauma and a lot of questions that I had about my life and where it was going. And, you know, so part of me is like, you know, thank God I'm alive and I'm moving in the right direction. But on the other hand, like, I'm still self-medicating. And it was one night, I had started dating my girlfriend, who's my wife now. Our very first date, we went out and I bought her a pitcher of beer. And I remember her looking at me and she's like, I don't want any of that. I was like, that's cool, because it's all for me anyway.
This is my appetite.
100%. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm just getting my lips wet, girl. You know,
it's breakfast.
Yeah. And she looked at me and she's just like, I don't like that. And the crazy thing is, up to that point, I'd been praying to God, like, take the alcohol away from me, because I don't have the strength to do it myself. Like, I am just weak to the alcohol. You know, hindsight 2020, I was weak to the unresolved trauma that led to the self-medicating. But I kept telling him, like, hey, just take it away, take it away. And then here was this moment where she says that. It turns out, like, I started dating a woman whose mom was in AA for like a gazillion years, right? Yeah. So, you know, what are the chances? And so over the next, you know, few months, that's the only time we would fight was because of my insecurities coming out when I was intoxicated, right? One night I got behind the wheel of her car and ended up crashing it into a house, running from the scene of the crime, falling into a creek, climbing out of that creek to get underneath a house. And I just remember laying under that house, and, you know, I could hear the cops, I could hear all the commotion, and I'm under there pleading with God to bail me out of that situation. I'm like, you know, I deserve to be punished. I deserve to have consequences for this. And all of a sudden, it was like this, and I was very intoxicated, but it was like, with the most clarity, there was this movie that played before my eyes of how over the last 4 years, how I was told I'd never walk again. Here I am, a fitness coach, working out, good shape, not taking pain meds anymore. Like, you know, they said I was going to be on disability for the rest of my life. I was working a full-time job. I didn't have to lean on the government. Like, of course, in that time, you're like wondering if you're ever going to be in a relationship again. What value do you bring to the table, all broken into pieces, right? and here I have this wonderful young lady in my life, and it's just like God just put it on me in the most loving way. It was like, I've been here for you, you know, and he just showed me his mercy and his grace, and I said, you know, if you bail me out of this situation, I'll never drink and use again. And we were living in Northern California. My wife had just graduated college, and you know, I told God, I said, you know, I'll never drink again, and if you want me to, I will move to Southern California so that Alyssa could be close to her family, and I'll quit this job that pays really well. Like, I don't care, just bail me out. And in that moment, like, this weight just came off of me, and I knew that I was never gonna go back to using and drinking again, and I haven't.
Amen. Praise God.
Yeah.
Talk about surrender.
Well, I knew, like, I felt it was like my heart broke because I felt like I was abusing his grace in my life. Like, one of the things that sometimes in our addictions or in our troubles that we forget, when we're sitting in jail or we're high, like, we get busted for a DUI, like, we're all mad because we're sitting in the SLE or you know, we got in trouble by the cop. But how many times did we get away with stuff?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, one
Surprised I only have one, you know, 2 DUIs. You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
instead of the 2,000 that was
yeah.
deserved, right? And you know what I really started to realize was the amount of grace, you know, that was bestowed on my life, regardless of the bad stuff that had happened to me. You know, you fast forward now and you see all that bad stuff. It's actually, I don't want to call it good stuff, but they were all valuable tools for me to go out into the world and help those that have been through similar things. So, like, I'm grateful. It's kind of crazy to say you're grateful for being molested, but in a way you're like, I can relate to a man that and share my story where he may have been bearing that for his whole life, and it's impacting his self-worth, and he's struggling with porn, and you know, he's having a hard time with intimacy with his wife because he's holding on to this thing that he can never talk about. And so because I can talk about it and share it, maybe that will give him freedom, you know. And so with all the trials and tribulations and experiences in my life, well, now I get to use those as opportunities to watch other men heal.
Yeah, not be broken from those things.
Yeah.
Because it's broken a lot of people.
And just give them the courage to open up about it too. You know, that's half the battle right there.
Ask
you know,
for help.
Yeah, asking for help, or even feeling like how he's just said, giving his testimony will help somebody. Like, you know what, I think it's about time I can talk about it. You know, just give them that strength to open up about it. You know.
And if anyone like watching this, you know, that resonates with you, or there's certain things that you're holding on to, feel free to reach out to any one of us. You know, I know this. Sometimes it's, you know, hard to go to a therapist. Sometimes it's hard to talk to family. They're
usually the hardest to talk to.
Yeah, we're afraid of being judged, right? But you know, that's not what we're here for. You know, we're here to say, like, we get it and we've been there, and we want to help you through it. So.
Yeah, amen. You know, when my scenario, when I came out when I was molested, I remember I told a family member, and she rejected me and told me that it wasn't true. You know what I mean? And that was
and that's just like you know, somebody barely put the knife in by doing that to you, and then she just finished shoving it all the way in. You know what I mean? Like, just that feeling of, you know, you trust this person, you love this person, you go to them, and, you know, confidentiality, all this stuff, and you know, and then they, you know, reject you like
that.
They're gonna have your back, and then
exactly.
So you just suppress it for longer.
You know, exactly. It's like, okay, so now I know now I know to not talk about it, because obviously if I can't go to my family member about it, then who else is gonna listen? You know what I mean?
Well, and I'll say that, like, you know, we're all believers here, and we all love the Lord, but how many people struggle to even go to church and share? You know what I'm saying? Like, one of my experiences was that I was groomed by a worship leader in my home church back in San Jose, and you know, how many people does that happen to, where someone in the church violates them? You know, the house of God. Like, this is supposed to be the house of God, right? And the reality is that even leadership, and I found out this later, leadership in the church knew of this man's behavior, but because he was such an asset to the church, they covered it up.
That's nuts.
You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, I know a lot of people have walked away from faith because of stuff like that, you know.
Okay.
And the reality, that's not a God thing, that's a man thing. But a lot of times we line those two things up.
Mm-hmm.
The same guy that did that to me also did that to a friend. The difference between myself and my buddy was that I had a pretty solid relationship with God, and I wasn't going to blame God for that man's behavior or even, you know, the church. You know, I wasn't going to reject God because of the, you know, because
His
it
actions.
happened. Yeah,
The guy's actions.
in the church, you know. But for my buddy, that's what happened. You know, he associated God with that man and the church and the staff that totally rejected him trying to come
Think
forward.
about the ripple effect, or the butterfly effect of the people that were affected from that man.
Exactly.
Well, there was a lot, you know. I mean, the truth is that he ended up getting murdered for that behavior. You know, a couple of years ago, I found out that, you know, he continued that behavior, and someone, you know, didn't like it too much, and took his life. And then after his life was taken, story after, and that's how it usually works,
That's
right?
always how
Now
it works.
everybody comes to surface,
Yeah,
and
once one of them comes up, then everybody.
But you know
else
how
has
many-
to- yeah.
how many men were impacted,
I can't
and the
even
thing
imagine.
is, he was a married man with kids on top of it.
Man, yeah.
Like, so now you're destroying people's life, and what about your family and your kids, and you know what I'm saying?
They're gonna be associated with, hey, that's that pastor that molested those boys.
Yeah.
That's their dad or something.
Yep.
You know, like
You
that's
know?
their daughter. You know, it's yeah, that's rough, man.
You know, and I know that a lot of people have been impacted by the church in that sense.
Right.
You know, and so, you know that you guys aren't alone out there. You know, I could share my experiences all day. I have plenty of them. You know, and the point of what we're doing today is to be able to open up and share some of the deepest hurts and traumas that we've had. You know, fortunately, we've been able to come out on the other side of it. You know, sometimes the healing is a long process, but we all want to help you through that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing like the angst of those buried demons holding you down.
Right.
You know, because my friends would tell me, like, I was smiling all the time. No one could ever tell that I had heart troubles. You know, not heart troubles, not like
Pain. Yeah,
pain. Yeah, I had pain. Right, I had pain because I did a good job smiling about it all the time.
I mean, you look at all the people that have, you know, committed suicide recently, like that video. I don't know what that guy's name was, but man, he was laughing and dancing with his family, and the next day he kills himself. Like, you know, some Robin Williams. You know, people that look like the happiest are covering up the most.
And that's what they always say. You know, like I saw this thing. It's like always check on your friends that that make it seem like they're okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're portraying like either on social media or even just when you're around them. You know what I mean? Because I've experienced that before. This guy that me and my dad used to play softball with. You know, I saw him at a Halloween party. This is before my oldest son was born. His name is Troy. Rest in peace. He super good athlete. He had that it factor. You know, he had to smile. He was a good looking dude. He was a good guy, good person. You know, always happy, always making people smile. Saw him at a Halloween party. You know, we're playing beer pong against each other. He's making everybody laugh. Next day he goes and hangs himself. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, man, I'll never forget the text I got from my dad. You know, hey, Troy killed himself. You know, I'm like, God, dude, like it just gives me chills now. But you just never know. You know what I mean? You never know what somebody's going through, and by people that seem like, man, he's so happy. He seems, those are the ones that what I learned to, that's it's always those that situation that always leads to that.
Well, I had a friend when I was laying in the hospital after my suicide attempt. She would always tell me, like, there's something, you're hiding something, Rob, you're hiding something. Like, dude, out of all the people I knew, like, she knew something was up. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm straight.
No,
like,
yeah.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
And then when she came to visit me in the hospital, she's like, I knew there was something there.
Yeah.
You know,
It's crazy.
It's like that. But I was still able to fool a lot of other people. Though,
I mean, the whole aspect of fooling people, like with the addiction and with fooling people that you have a problem, right? And fooling people that you have an underlying issue that you don't want people to know about, and that's the whole point of this, is to try to make sure that we can bring that to surface and help people with that.
You got to surround yourself with good people, though.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you want to share that story with your lady, how she always reaches out. checking on you.
Oh yeah,
that's a good
yeah. Like my previous relationships and stuff. I mean, I never really knew what it was like to be loved. And when I was with my ex-wife, we based our relationship, our entire relationship was partying. Was drinking and doing drugs. Like when we got married, man, we went to the courthouse down, off the Centennial Garden of Gods, drank a bottle of Crown Apple and did a gram of cocaine and went in and signed our paperwork, our marriage certificate. You know what I mean? That's what it was. So it's just, I never really understood what love was to love somebody. You know what I mean? And it was always just either the drugs, the alcohol, whatever it was. And I never knew what it was like to have somebody love me. And now with my girlfriend with she's, God knew I needed her. You know what I mean? And I didn't even know. I didn't. I was still coming out of my divorce, and I was still trying to find myself fresh out of rehab. And I was still trying to find my way and all this stuff. And we just happened to cross paths. And I went to middle school. It's ironic. It's a crazy story. We went to the same elementary school, same middle school, and same high school. At different times, obviously. I'm a little bit older, but we were in high school at the same time. And she was out there with her best friend. Her best friend's husband played, and so we just kind of ran into each other and been dating ever since. And she makes such an effort because she knows everything. She makes such an effort to check on me, and make sure, hey, you doing okay? You know what I mean? Do you need anything? You know what I mean? And like I said, like I was telling you guys earlier, I'd be at work just busting my butt, and she just randomly, even in the middle of a conversation, just, hey, you doing okay?
That's huge.
Are you? Like, can I help you with anything? And like she can also tell, because my biggest thing, whenever somebody would try to talk to me about what I was going through and stuff, or especially after my son passed away, we'll get to that story in a second, but people would be like, hey, you doing okay? I'm fine. I'm fine. You know what I mean? And that's the biggest lie I told everybody. I'm fine. When I wasn't. You know what I mean? And when me and Lexi first started dating, I would try to, if I was struggling with something or something, I'd be like, no, I'm fine. She's like, what is wrong? You know what I mean? Like calling me out, and the fact that she even wanted, like, it was new to me, you know what I mean? And so by her, like, no, what's wrong? It like put the ball in my court and made me have accountability to talk about what I needed to do, work on my communication, you know what I mean? Because whenever, even when we argue, we have arguments just like everybody else, Before my past relationships, I would just shut down, you know what? I'm leaving, I'm walking away, you know what I mean? I wouldn't discuss it, it would just kind of blow over, whatever, and then we just continue on with our lives. Now I have, okay, this is what's going on. Take a step back, assess the situation and go from there. But just the fact that she cares so much is just, something I never felt. You know what I mean? She makes me feel good about myself, and not only as as a father, as a protector, as a, I go to work and bust my butt every day, like she just appreciates me. I never had that before. You know what I mean? And it's a very tough thing to deal with at first, you know what I mean? Because it's so new and you don't know what that feels like, you know what I mean? And so it's just, it's all about, being open and, being willing to accept that help and that love, and that just everything, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Thank you. Anything else you guys want to share, testimony-wise?
No, I mean, if we're talking about trauma and stuff, I mean, just a quick background about me, I grew up with both parents together, high school sweethearts, love my parents to death, they did everything they could for me and, to put me on the correct path, if you will, in their eyes anyway, Growing up, I mean, I drank, I didn't really party in high school, I didn't really do anything, I started drinking, like, after I graduated, you know what I mean? So, I first it was socially, go to parties, all this stuff, I always worked, always did that, and then, I got injured. I had to have shoulder surgery, and I got addicted to painkillers. I saw the #1 shoulder and knee specialist in the city, and he went in. The surgery was supposed to last like an hour and a half, and ended up lasting like 5 hours because he went there, saw something. It was very bad. So I had to be constantly monitored. I'd have to go in twice a week, right? So my first visit of the week, I'd see him. And then the second part of the week, I'd see his nurse practitioner or whatever. Then it would go from twice a week to once a week. You know what I mean? So I would see him one week, and I'd see his assistant the next. And they would both, how you doing on pills? And this is back in 2009, 2010. How you doing on pills? I'm kind of running a little low. Okay, yeah, we'll refill it. I was getting 60 pills a week. You know what I mean? 60 painkillers a week, and I'm like, I have a pretty high pain tolerance. You know, I took it because I like the way it made me feel. You know what I mean? It didn't really like mask the hurt. You know what I mean? It just made me like, you know what I mean? That sense of relief. You know, and next thing you know, I'm popping two when I wake up. I'm popping two at lunch. You know, popping two at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the evening. You know, popping two after dinner, then popping two more. You know, I was taking 10, 12 pills a day. You know what I mean? And I would have so many of them because the doctors, you know, I'm not blaming the doctors or blaming the system or anything. You know, they're just, all right, here you go. Oh, you need some more pills? I'm like, yeah. Okay, cool. I was taking advantage of it. You know what I mean? And so then I was able to kick that, thank God. But I always continued to drink. Drinking was always my thing, right? So right about the time when I stopped taking the painkillers is when I discovered cocaine. My dad used to always scare the crap out of me with this. I always thought cocaine, you did it once, you're gonna die. You know what I mean? Like, literally, like, because he always told me there's a basketball player named Lynn Bias. I don't know if you remember who he was. You know, that story of how he got drafted #1 overall, went out and partied that night, did coke one time, and his heart exploded. So my dad always installed in me, like, cocaine is terrible, you know, so I never did it. Then one time I got super drunk and I was hanging out with my buddy who, you know, did some prison time, and he was like, here, dude, do this. He's like, we got a couple more parties to go to. He's like, you need to sober up. I'm like, you know, so I remember doing it. My life changed forever. You know, that feeling I got of knowing that I could do this to be able to drink more. Sign me up, dude.
You know what's crazy about that? So you remember the movie Flight?
Yes. Yes.
So do you know how real that? So the first time, so I have like, so we were in Vegas, and this is not to glorify anything. This is just how sneaky drugs can be, right?
Yeah.
Because they can. And I remember we all went to a club, and you know, we were drinking, and then someone handed it to me, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I just did it. And then in that moment was like, what? Like, you just became, and in that moment, like, the next 3 years were just straight hardcore addiction.
And see, for me, it wasn't like, don't get me wrong, I did it, but my drinking, I think at that time was an addiction, but I would still, you know, I use cocaine every once in a while, right? Like, maybe once a month, once every couple months, whatever, right? It wasn't until then I started to progressively drink. I mean, I always continued to drink, but then coming up on 6 years ago this year, my son passed away when he was 3 weeks old. So and I was in a terrible car accident before that, and I got a massive settlement on a Wednesday. He passed away on Friday. So I just went nuts, right? And that's when I guess I could say that's when my true addiction with cocaine started. You know what I mean? Before, I mean, I guess I don't know if you consider me being addicted to it when I was just partying, you know, like using it every now and then. The alcohol was always my addiction. Yeah. But when it became, when I wouldn't be able to drink without the cocaine was after my son passed away. You know, and it continued just until about 8 months ago.
You feel like you were suppressing it with the cocaine?
Yes. So basically, I mean, going through that trauma of losing a child is something that I don't ever wish upon my worst enemy. You know what I mean? And it's something that when that happened, I struggled with my faith too. You know, because I never really believed in God. I mean, I did